On this installment of Creative Cabinet Fever, I take things a little bit differently. I bring you a magician. So I know usually I concentrate on like the music scene, but sometimes I like to do things just for me. This is my friend Dean. He is incredible and I would like to share with you his magic. Dean, welcome to the show.
How are you?
Good yourself? It's a miserable day here
Good.
in Waterford, huh?
It is. I'm in Dungarvan. It's no better down here.
Yeah, it's just the way it is.
A lovely little country if we could roof it.
I know, right? Roof it with like sun like capture solar power things.
Yeah, yeah. I'm real.
So Dean, you're really interesting. You're an illusionist and a magician and many other things, and
Yeah.
I'm really curious to get everyone to know you better, which is why we're doing this interview, I guess. So we had a meeting in the park recently where we shared some magic,
hmm
amongst other things. You know, we talked about the world we're living in and so many other things over a coffee. And then I was like, oh, well, I would like people to know you better. And I was like, let's do an interview. And we booked this in, and here we are. But how does one get started in your line of work?
Um, well, when I think I was about seven, and I asked for a magic set. It was one of those real old Marvel magic sets for Christmas with the top hat and the bunny that comes out of it and all of that crack. Um, and it just snowballed from there. I'd do the little cups and balls trick, and then I'd kind of go away and I'd upgrade it to like rugby balls under buckets. And that was stumping the adults more so than the kids, because the adults were like, that's an obligated shape, and he can't just sneak it out from one bucket to another. And that's where I got the taste for it. And then when I went into secondary school, I picked up the likes of a deck of cards, and I learned sleight of hand and water park in Waterford, the secondary school. That's where I gained my confidence, because I was getting pulled out of classes that I should have been in and should have been learning things to go and perform on other classes to entertain them by the teachers. So that helped me to break that barrier of walking up to someone and saying, "Can I show you a magic trick?" And I think that's what makes magic one of the more difficult uh, things to performances to do, because with close-up magic you do have to break down someone's wall of approaching them. That wall goes straight up, and you have to break through that and be like, "Can I show you something?" Where like a stand-up comedian stands on a stage, so people go to a comedy night and they know that they're going to see a comedian. Buskers, they go on the street, so it's as people are passing by, it takes the person's interest. But with a close-up magician, we have to come to you. If we're standing on the side of the street holding a deck of cards, no one is going to walk up and say, "Show me a trick." They're not going to know. They're just going to think you're some weirdo hanging around with a deck of cards. So you have to be the one to instigate it. And then I learned the likes of psychology. I didn't go to college or anything like that. I would just go to the library and I would pick up psychology books and I'd read them. And some of it made sense. And then I'd go to my friends and I'd go to my family and I'd test it out. And then when I tested that out, I'd go out in the street and I'd test it out there. And that's how I got into likes of mind reading, mentalism, and all of that kind of stuff, and using people's body language and influencing them and things like that. And then I got into the escapology because of Harry Houdini, who you'll see behind me. And I learned how to pick locks, pick handcuffs. I won my first ever set of handcuffs off a guard. I I bet him 150 euros that I could get out of his cuffs without a key in under a minute. And I think I did it in 49 seconds, and I got to keep his cuffs. Um, so yeah, then I
Yeah.
learned how to do straight jackets and hold my breath underwater for stupid amounts of time and things like that.
Yeah, which is amazing. Like, I look at your career and I go, oh my God, like if I just stayed at the base longer, I could be, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. People don't realize how much work goes into honing your craft. Like, everyone could be anything if they just wanted it bad enough or tried hard enough. So obviously Houdini is one of your main influences.
Yeah.
How did he hook you? Like,
Oh, I think it was his audacity. you know, he would walk into even when he was younger, he'd walk into police stations with a journalist from the paper and walk up to the chief of police and was like, handcuff me, lock me in your cells, I will get out. You can't hold me. And the police guy was like, what are you on about? And he's like, look, if I don't get out, you can keep me for 24 hours for breach of the peace or, you know, whatever. And something Houdini learned how to do for years was to take a punch from anybody to the stomach, no matter who it was. And he'd often go to these really ticked off police chiefs and be like, you want to hit me? Come on, hit me right here. And, you know, that had shocked them. But then he'd think like, he's never getting out of our handcuffs. He's never getting out of our cell. And they come back the next morning and Houdini wasn't there, but the cell was still locked and the cuffs were on the floor. So it was his audacity, things like that. And he'd walk up to a bridge and he'd gather a crowd, or he'd put out a word that, you know, someone is going to do something on this bridge, that if it fails, it means certain death. And he'd turn up and he'd strip down to his boxers and he'd get handcuffed and he'd just jump off, you know, and people loved it. Or he'd hang from a building by a crane in a straitjacket upside down. And like, people back in those days, and I think it was the time of the Great Depression and things like that, people had never seen that. And this was a kind of a way for them to escape almost their own worries and their own troubles, because they're like, this guy is practically killing himself and getting away with it, you know, so we can deal with this another little while.
Yeah, and
And
that's
it
the
was things like that that
beauty.
really drew me to him. You know, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful, like magic and escapism, the way that it can actually completely take you out of the world as it is. Like that
Yeah.
skill, being able to just overwhelm people with something so different. Like, you know,
Mm.
it's a brilliant, brilliant skill to have. So you're
I, I think every performer. I don't think it's just magicians, but I think every performer has that mindset. If you can bring people to your gig, and if you can take them away from their worries, their fears, their rent that's due, the ESB bill that came in that morning, if you can take them away from those things and bring them back to when they were like 4, where everything was possible and everything was magical, then you've done your job. Even if it was only one person, that's what your job is as a performer. It's to just take people out of their own mind and just to lead them into this rabbit hole for an hour or 2 hours, and then send them back out to the world. And I guarantee you the troubles that troubled them when they came in won't be nearly as bad as when they go out.
Yeah, it's about harnessing the ability to bring people back into the moment. Like, so it's
Yeah.
about getting people to live in the now and kind of be tricked and fooled into just feeling that flow. So
Yeah.
yeah, all performers are wonderful at that. But yours is obviously a little bit more niche. There's not that many.
No, and especially in Ireland, we're sadly a bit of a dying breed in Ireland. And one thing Ireland is really lacking is female magicians. So you should look into it, you know?
Look, if I take any more
Definitely, you
up
never know.
skills this year, I think yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. Actually, that's a really, really good thing to say. Like, I wonder what it is that stops women from wanting to pursue that as a career. Do you know? So obviously,
Now, there's more magicians in America now that are coming up that are female. There's a couple of them in Vegas, and it's not just, you know, it's not that typical stage illusion of, you know, the magician and the magician's assistant. It's the magician's assistant is now the magician, and she's kicking ass. There are some amazing female magicians and illusionists out there, and still not so many in the mentalism world. There is a couple after coming up in the escapology world. There's a girl called the Lady Houdini, and she puts herself in like the Chinese water torture cell, and she is amazing, absolutely amazing. And then there was that girl that was on America's Got Talent, I think. Donna, I think was her name, the Great Donna or something like that. And she like brought Britain's or America's Got Talent to a pool. She was wrapped in chains and she just jumps in. And yeah, amazing.
that is amazing. I knew nothing of the world of female magicians because obviously I'm a misogynist at heart too. And I wasn't aware that you could be, you know, actually a
Definitely.
magician as a woman.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you've done incredible performances, and obviously we're finding ourselves in a time that's a little bit different. So you don't get to perform at the moment, but I'd love to talk about your journey and career. So take me through things you've done, things that you would like to do in the future, where you're at.
Things that I've done. I remember my first gig. That was a big one because it was just pure and utter fluke, nothing else. Um, it was a bouncer on the door of what was Ruby's at the time in Waterford. And anyone from Waterford, that's a staple. They know Ruby's. Um, but it was essentially a nightclub. And it was a bouncer called Ross that was on the door, an English chap. And I was doing magic, and he got onto the manager, Killian. Killian brought me in, and I did a few tricks for him. And he was like, "Can you do every Friday and Saturday night, table to table between the lounges?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Wow." And that's when I realized, I was like 16. I was like, that's when I realized I could make money doing this. And I was like, if people are going to pay me, I'm going to keep doing this. So yeah, and then um, I got a couple of headline shows in Waterford, um, but I think things really didn't start improving, bigger wise until I did the Escape. That was the big one. Um, After that, I was asked on Ireland AM, and the Sun picked it up, the Mirror picked it up, and they just ran with it. And then I went to Vegas, came home then, and COVID hit. So yeah.
Yeah, so for anyone watching that doesn't know you, talk about your escape.
Yeah, I wanted to do a little homage to Houdini. I wanted my first escape, my first publicized escape, big escape, to be in Waterford. And I wanted it to be an homage to Houdini. I wanted it something that he'd kind of look down on. That was dope. So I did it, I think, a couple of days before his death anniversary. He died on 31st of October. I think I did it earlier October. Um, I was wrapped in 40 feet of chains, hand and ankle restraints, 8 padlocks, and I had 50 kgs of additional weight put over my shoulders. And I jumped into the Waterford Crystal swimming pool, over 2 meters down. And then I stupidly had a pool cover pulled over to plunge me into darkness. And I had to get out. There was no keys. I had a couple of bobby pins, and that was that. Now there was a diver down the shallow end, but as I said, I stupidly said, let's pull the pool cover over the top. Let's make it a little bit more dangerous. And what I didn't realize was the pool cover being over me and pretty much half of the pool meant that the safety diver couldn't actually see me. So if I had to have given a signal or anything, he wasn't going to see it. But I was about 90% of the way done. I didn't have any idea how long I was in there, but when I was reaching around for the one that was on the back of the bottom part of my back, the padlock, to pick it, I shifted the shoulder, and it moved the chains, which moved the weights, which meant my neck ended up getting pinned to the bottom of the pool. And I knew if I had panicked, I knew, things weren't going to go well. So I picked the lock, and I started making my way up to the surface. And I remember I hit if you watch the video on YouTube, my head hits the cover, because I just shoot straight up. And the diver, you see him coming down underneath it, and he literally just grabs me and reefs me out. And that was the first bit of air I'd gotten. I think it was 4 minutes and 20 seconds total.
That's amazing. Like, not all of us have our sink or swim moments be that actual. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like, you're right. Like, it's like all of us on a day to day. If we just look at everything on a day to day and be like, okay, this is my sink or swim moment. So I can panic and struggle, or I can just remain calm and get myself out of it. So there's a lot to be learned, even just looking at that allegory and going, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I kind of wanted to do with Houdini, and following on from him was for people who do feel like they're going through the hardest thing in their life, is to realize that you can escape from that. You know what I mean? You can go for a walk, you can do this, and next week, tomorrow, an hour later, it could be that bit better, and it might not look as bad. And I think that's why a lot of escape artists do what they do. And some psychologists would say that we're escaping from stuff ourselves. I have a very anxious little doggy, by the way. She's waiting for her sister to come home. So if you hear the little whimpers, that's why. Um, Her sister went out for a walk and she got left at home, so she's not happy. Um, but I think even as escape artists, we put ourselves into these things because we're all trying to escape things in our life, and I think that's our way of dealing with it.
Yeah, well, I think everyone is doing that to a point or another. So whether what
Mm.
you do is listen to music in order to
You're
not be.
escaping from something, yeah. Even if it's just a bad mood.
Yeah, sometimes it's not even hour by hour. You have to take it at second by second. Do you know?
Yeah.
And you have to feel all those things as well. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people like to pretend they're okay all the time. Like,
Even the strongest rocks will crack.
yeah,
That's the way to look at it.
absolutely. So, like, obviously, after that escape, we've
Yep.
had media coverage of a massive amount, and then we had Vegas. So let's talk about those things. Like, how does it
Yeah.
feel to go, like, your career's like, yay! And that's all we're going to focus on. The rest of the story, like, that's nobody's choice fault. It's just the world around us, okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it was after it was after the Sun had covered the escape. The girl that covered it, Aoife, she rang me and she was like, okay, you think this is a really pretty gnarly escape. What else can you do? I was like, I could predict your headlines. She's like, no, you can't. I was like, watch me. So I wrote down a load of predictions and I dropped them up to them in the Sun's head office. And she said, when do you want to come back to do it? I was like, you ring me. I was like, whenever. She's like, okay. So she was like, okay. So I think we left it a month. And I went back and I opened them up, and I didn't even open them. I didn't touch them. Once I handed them to her, when I came back, she wouldn't let me touch them. She's like, "You're not." They were pure skepticals, real journalists, and she wouldn't let me touch them. I said, "That's fine." So they ripped them open, and I think it was around November, 2018, and I had successfully predicted the complete front headline. And they had gotten the editor on the phone, and he was like, tell me how much this guy F's up, because this is not happening. And she had to ring him back and was like, he got everything right. So yeah, they couldn't believe it. And I actually had named at the bottom of it, the bottom of the prediction, I had named one of the employees who was there on the day and told him that he would be thinking about his girlfriend Jess. And he lost it. He was unconsolable. And once that hit the internet, the producer from Ireland AM got onto me, and she's like, "This is unreal. You need to come in." So I went out that Thursday and went on to Ireland AM, and then I got the call about performing in Vegas that May, and I flew out the 22nd of May 2019 for a week in Vegas.
That's amazing. Like, it's amazing. Like, it's just such a cool story. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just keep pushing yourself and see where you end up. So tell me about Vegas, Dean. I've never been, but I've seen it on CSI and stuff.
I know my mother was the same, because when I checked into the hotel, I had to video call her, and I had the phone hanging out the window, up against the window, and you could see like the Bellagio fountains and stuff. And she, oh my God, it's real.
CSI vibes.
Yeah. So I stayed in the Vidara Hotel. It's just absolutely fantastic. There's no casino in it. It's a bit more laid back and quiet. And I was there for a week. We did 4 shows. We went down to Fremont Street, and it was a little harder to do close-up magic and street performances over there, because you need permits to be a street performer. And they give you like a circle that you have to stand in on Fremont Street, and you have to stay within that circle. If you go outside, you get like a $500 fine and all of that kind of stuff. And that's where, like, the girls in the bikinis and the baby head with the big muscly body that looks really weird, that's where they stand, and they like entice people to come into their circle. It's almost like, come to the dark side, we've got cookies kind of thing. But yeah, so that made it a bit more difficult. You couldn't film outside any of the hotels without permission from them because it's all copyright. And it was definitely a bigger eye opener than filming in Ireland, where like Supermax is not going to care if you've got a camera outside. Do you know that kind of way? Um, so yeah, it was a big wake up call. It was a big eye opener from someone who I've been to New York and stuff like that performing before, and New York is just so heavily tourist. They don't care about cameras, but Vegas, it's all about the money. It's all about the money. So, and that's kind of what it's known for. Obviously, it's a gambling city. So it only makes sense, I suppose, that they'd have different copyright laws and all of that kind of stuff. So it makes it a bit harder. You couldn't see the Old Irish trad band down on Fremont Street giving it the welly on a Saturday night. It's just not going to happen. Sadly, I think it'd go down well.
Yeah, I think so. But look, I can understand it too,
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Like, I only left Ireland once, and that was to go to Japan. So like, I always look at America and be like, oh, that seems like it's so massive, and Tokyo is big too. So like,
It's a fair distance. My first holiday was to Spain, and that hasn't got a thing on Japan.
look. I went when I was like, I don't know, it's 11 years ago now. I ended up getting a pass to stay with the US Navy for 3 weeks. So I was touring Japan. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was like a dream come true. But
And you
outside,
had a whole fleet of bodyguards.
pretty much, yeah.
I'd say the Japanese people were like, who is she and how is she better than Beyonce? She has an army.
And I looked like a manga character at the time. I had like fiery red hair at the front and these blonde spikes of short hair at the back, and yeah.
Well, they definitely knew you were someone important. They knew it.
We're all somebody important, Dean. But yeah, that's the only time I've left Europe. Outside of that, all I really did is travel most of Europe and enjoyed it very much. So I've never had any experience in America. It's amazing that you've been working in New York and working in Vegas. In your career so far, do you want to talk about your worst gig and your best gig and the experiences that you have learned along the way?
Sure. I think everyone remembers their worst gigs so much more than their best, because the best just kind of mellow out. I don't think an artist is ever truly happy with a performance. I think they always critique it some way. There's always some way that I could have done that better, or some, I could have tuned this a bit better or whatever. But I remember my worst, like it was yesterday. I was in it was actually a private gig. But it was like no one cared that there was a magician there or a mentalist there. There was no real want for it. But the organizer, bless him and save him, he was one of them really preppy guys. And he was like the guy that always tries to rally the troops, but the troops are like, I'm going home. They're just not into it. So he booked me and it was grand. And I was going around and they were like, yeah, you can read our minds. What, do you want, a cookie? Like, it was just falling flat. And it got to a stage where even I was like, what? What do I do? So I just, you just soldier on. It doesn't matter if there's 2 people in the audience, if there's 1 person in the audience, or 100,000 people in the audience. You keep going, because that one person, and in fairness, the guy was really into the magic, the fellow who booked me, and he loved it. So me performing for him kind of outweighed all of the more negative people. But that was by far the most uncomfortable performance I think I've ever given. Is like, you'd be just spreading out the card, like, pick a card, and they'd be like, it's almost like, ah.
Yeah, I think we've all felt that in life in general. Like, even being in a room with someone who just could not give a crap that you're there and is fully out loud about it, it's so uncomfortable. So I can't imagine what it's like as a performer.
Oh yeah, I think when you're a performer, especially if you're, I think it covers performers as a whole spectrum, all over the place. make rejection your best friend, because it will hurt a whole lot less, because you're going to hear it a whole lot in your career. People are going to slam doors. People are going to say, nah, I'm not interested. You keep knocking on the doors, kick on them, use a battering ram, do whatever you need to do, and don't let anyone tell you no. But make no your best friend, because if you get so many yeses, it just becomes mundane. There's no excitement in it then. You know, it's almost like winning the lotto and you don't have to work for it anymore. You know what I mean? You don't have to do any work. You've got all this money, and it takes the spice out of life. Do you know what I mean? It takes that struggle that you fight for, and then you get to that point, and then you're like, okay, well, how do I get to the next step? You know, and it's that uphill battle. But when you get to the top, then the view is unreal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think I learn way more from my mistakes than I'll ever learn from my successes. And I really enjoy being turned down, actually. I like a fight. Like, so if I'm knocking on a door, it won't open, I'll look for a window. If that window is closed, I'll look for a ladder. If the next window is closed, I'll grab a brick. But exactly. I ain't stopping. Like, do you know what I mean?
And it all came to kind of fruition. I don't like talking, you know, like I've got a big ego, because I certainly don't. Yeah. But it was definitely a milestone for me when a chap that said no to me years ago when I was starting out, and years later came back to me and was like, would you do this gig for me, blah blah blah. And I, luckily enough, and I was in Vegas at the time, I genuinely couldn't take the gig, but it was just, you know, and I think it's something that to inspire artists to keep going is, don't listen to those people that say no. Don't listen to the people that will tell you you're shite. It's their opinion. It's one person's opinion on your whole career. Don't listen to them, because there is a whole host of people out there that will think you're the shit, and they will pay whatever to go and see you. And that's what you need to keep in your head, because those people that do try and bring you down, they're afraid that you'll succeed and prove them wrong. So the only thing to do is to succeed and prove them wrong.
Prove them all wrong.
If I was ever going to lose the run of myself, because I was lucky enough, I'd done magic for the girl that was checking me in on the way back from Vegas, and I had to fly into San Francisco to fly to Dublin. So I was doing a bit of card trick, because you know, I put my passport, I took my stuff out of my pocket, which was my passport, my headphones, and a deck of cards. And she's like, "You mind me asking what the cards are for?" I was like, "I'm a magician." She's like, "Oh my God, can you show me something?" I was like, "Absolutely." So did a trick for her, and she upgraded me to first class from Vegas to San Francisco. So I was like, this is amazing. And then fast forward 18 hours, and I was at home here in Dungarvan, out the back, scooping up a backyard full of doo-doo. Looking up at a plane going, I was first class not 18 hours ago. And now I'm cleaning up poop.
Yeah, but like, that's life, isn't it? Like, you have ups and downs, and then these weird lulls in between that just kind of have like this weird sense of rest to them almost. It's like, oh, nothing's happening, maybe I'll sleep. But that's it, like, do you know? And it's amazing. Like, I guess there must be part of you that's like, ugh, why am I always the entertainer? Like, so if you're around your mates or whatever, I don't know, I'm asking, I think I might feel like a performing monkey. Like, does that ever come to a point where you're like, actually, fuck off, this is my career, I don't have to fucking perform for you?
It used to be like that, but I think they all got the message. Either that or they just really don't care anymore. My aunt was horrible for it. Any family function I'd go to, like, do something. I'm like, oh my God, I want out of this family. But no, it was all done in support and love. You know what I mean? There was no, there was a little greed to it. I'm not going to lie, there was a little greed to it. It's look, it comes with the territory. You know what I mean? Your friends and your family are going to be the people that make or break you. Because from the start, they're the first people that see the first performances, and at the end, they're the last people to see the last performances. They're the last people to leave that building, because they want to wish you well. They want to tell you you did a great job, even if you were crap and there was only one person in the audience. They want to tell you that was the best show they've ever seen. So when they ask you to do a trick and things like that, you bite the bullet, you do it for them, because those people are going to give you the more honest opinion than you'll ever get from anyone else in the world. My mother is by far my biggest fan because she has seen every trick, and I'm not kidding, every trick I've ever done. And she will. She has she has no filter. She will turn around and she go, "That is crap. That is the worst thing I have ever seen." And I'm there going, "I worked 6 months on that." But she does it out of love. She does it to make me better. She does it so that people on the street don't go, "That was a shit trick. You know, I'm not going to see him again." But that's what you need as a performer. And I think that's the saddest part of a lot of entertainers and performers' career is when they do make it to that point, you know, that they're happy with, they lose the run of themselves. You know, the head, if you want to say the head gets too big for the shoulders or whatever it is, but they really need those people that were there at the start to ground them again. You know, you need to remember what it was like back when you couldn't pay your rent. Not that you couldn't go out and buy a brand new house whenever you wanted, because you can do that now. You need to remember back when you were living on the Mackie Deals Euro Saver menu, you know? But I think having those people, and if it costs you performing for them every time you see them, even if it's only a small trick, that's a small price to pay for a lifetime of truth and honesty.
Yeah, and that's a really, really beautiful way to say it and see it. And you're right, it's so important to stay humble no matter how successful you get or what you're up to, or always remember the people who loved you and saw you for who you were before anyone else was smart enough to see what you know about yourself already. Do you know what I mean?
I performed in Spree in 2012. And that, to me, that was a headline. That was a headline of a career thing. It's like, I was in the Spree magazine. And I was on cloud nine, and where was I going with that? My mind is just at a complete blank. Yes, that's what I was doing. I'd done a trick on a girl, and she asked me to sign the card. So she had signed the card, and she asked me to sign it, and she put it in her wallet. And I bumped into her in 2018 before the stunt, and she opened her purse and she pulled out the same card with the two signatures on. And my heart melted. I was gone. I was like, just take some free tickets. Oh! So yeah, no, it's things like that make a performer. That's the kind of thing that really make people think, Jesus, you know, that's the kind of impact you as a performer can have on people's lives, you know, because she would have opened her purse 100 times a day, and she would have seen that card, and it would have brought back that memory of what I was saying earlier. You know, you're taking people out of that little rent, you know, bill bubble, and it takes it. You know, she can remember back to a better time, and she can go, yeah, and she got a smile on her face then, you know, and things look a lot better with a smile on her face.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like, and it's so nice for you to have that. Like, you know, it's amazing. It's freaking amazing. So a lot of the people I would talk to are performers in a different form to you. Okay, so a question I'd have for someone like you is, how much of Dean is the magician and how much of the magician is Dean? Do those two ever does it get hard to differentiate? Because at least with a musician, you can put your guitar down, right? You don't have to open your voice, you don't have to sing. So where does the barrier maybe change a little bit for someone in your line of work?
A lot of people that come around me and things like that, they're always afraid to think things because they think that I'll know. And you know, it's not like I that switch on every minute of every day, and I'm walking down the street going, he's thinking of this, she's thinking of that, and you know, that would be mind melting. But for me, I don't think my mind ever stops creating magic. You know, you're always looking at something that you could do. If you pick up a pen, you're thinking, how could I make this a magic trick? So I don't think it ever really switches off. I've often woken up at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I actually have a notepad right beside my bed because I write things down, and then I go back to sleep. So I never really switch off, but my release comes in music. I throw headphones on, I lay back in this chair, and I've got pictures of Harry Houdini and a really amazing picture of, and you know, things like that. So I sit back and I look at them, and I have my headphones on and I listen to music and I just get lost. absolutely lost. And then I look at the time and an hour has passed, and it's just, I don't know where it's gone. So that's kind of the difference in I suppose being a magician versus, like you were saying, being in a band. You know, you put the instruments down and you leave, your mind leaves with you. But I always, like right now, I've always got cards. I've always got something on me. Even in my wallet, I've got tricks, because you never want to get stopped and not have anything to show someone if they ask. So I always have to carry something. So it's always in my forefront. So it's always in my mind. So yeah, it's a bit of a 9 to 5 or a 24/7, really, 365.
Yeah. And I guess it's the same sort of for musicians, and not sort of, like, once creativity hits, like, you might have to just leave the room, like. But even for a creative like me, a lot of people probably wouldn't see what I do as being a creative, but like, I am at the forefront of many projects, and I have to constantly be reinventing, thinking outside the box on how to push other creatives in order to allow there to be platforms and stuff like that. So I'd be the same as you. I have to have a notebook with me at all times. I have more Google Drives than I knew was needed. Do you know what I mean? Like, for all these ideas and stuff. So yeah, it's like, I can step away from it, but it's hard. And then as well, because I'm so heavily relied upon by others, which is something that people don't realize either. My phone doesn't stop. Like, I could get messages about anything all the time. Actually getting space to actually just be is neon impossible sometimes. So I lose myself to music too. What have you been listening to the most lately, since we're going to go back to the music?
Oh, music. I am all over the place with music. Like, if you looked at my Spotify now, you would go, you are an 80-year-old heavy metal 16-year-old person. What are you listening to? Like, when the spectrum is just too big. In one setting, I could go from Nickelback to 50 Cent to Eminem to LaRue. Do you remember her, the one with the big huge mohawk? I loved her. To Paramore, to Slipknot, Cradle of Filth, Lordi, to Paul Simon, Pavarotti. I'm a mess. I'm a skip of music. I love it all. It just depends on the mood. Like, before a show, before I go out on stage on like that, Slipknot all the way, Slipknot. Iowa is probably my go-to album for that kind of crack. And then when I come back in, it's Pavarotti, it's Ave Maria, it's opera, to look at me tattoos and all the rest of it, you wouldn't think there was a drop of Pavarotti in them, but I absolutely love it. I adore it. There was actually it's an orchestral piece of music that actually Anthony Hopkins wrote. And then Andre Rieu actually composed it for him and didn't tell him, but invited him to one of his shows. And I think the video is on YouTube. And Anthony Hopkins notices it and hears it for the first time. Yeah. Oh, it's absolute magic.
Yeah, stuff like that is magic. And I'd have similar taste in music as you. Like, if I'm having a really, really bad day and you know me and you hear Wait and Bleed, do not knock. Like, just let me get it out of my system. But at the same time, my granddad was a massive Pavarotti fan. So if I need to just be cajoled a little bit by music, I will put on Pavarotti and gladly just have that incredible...
Sit back, relax, and just lose yourself. Yeah, it's amazing. And then you've got the likes of Paul Simon or Ray Charles. I love Ray Charles. Georgia on My Mind is just unreal. And then you've got the classics like Thin Lizzy. Oh, see, a road trip. I could not plan a road trip big enough for my playlist. It's just...
I actually can't wait for the day I'm in a car with a person and they're like, let's go on a road trip. I'm like, yes, but I'm bringing my entire CD collection. Right? Because I just want to listen to music on end in a car in an unending, like, actual... Let's change. Like, I want to pretend I'm a CD DJ again and I have CDJs with me, but on a road trip, this song, since this countryside, I'm going to play it now because I feel it.
Yeah, 100%. I love driving to Dublin, the motorway, and just it's a 2-hour concert of me, whether you like it or not. That's what you're getting.
Yeah. I'm not far behind you, except I don't drive, so it's like whoever will bring me gets a 2-hour concert of me. Or a bus full of people on many occasions have had to deal with Rebecca karaoke, and there's very little can be done about that.
They see that's where James Corden could learn something. Carpool karaoke? Nah, it's bus karaoke.
Yeah.
Whole bus singing. There you go.
Yeah, that's the only way to do it. It's the only way, like, to energize a whole bus full of people. Just put on a banger of a track and be like, do you know this song? No, well, you will by the end of this bus journey.
It's on repeat and I'm not changing it.
Yeah, no. A bus ride with me is usually very, Look, I like to lighten people's days up in whatever ways I fancy.
That's it.
So, Dean, we're coming to the end of our interview. It's been wonderful talking to you, chatting to you, getting to know you better. Is there anything you would like to add before I stop recording?
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me. I'm your second last, I think you were saying.
My second last for a while, yeah. My project load is really catching up with me, and I've made a conscious decision that I am not going to take on every interview that is sent my way anymore for a while.
Something's got to give. Otherwise, something falls.
Yeah, and that something shouldn't be me. So, I love doing these. I love the genuine honor it is to delve into people's lives and allow other people to know what other people are up to. But there comes a point, I guess, where I have to realize that this moment in time is not forever. And instead of focusing on everyone else and what they need, I need to focus on what I need so that when things kick back off, I actually have a career ahead of me and I'm not just a podcaster, because that was never the plan.
You're hitting the ground running.
Yeah.
Or in your case, sprinting.
Sink or swim. Sink or swim. I'm just going to try not panic.
Listen to Dory. Dory had the soundest advice ever. Just keep swimming. That's all it is. Just keep swimming.
Even with one smaller fin than the other, just keep going.
There you go.
Dean,
it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolute
I was about
pleasure.
to say it was a pleasure too. I'm going to stop recording now and we can go back to our chats.